is we've never seen a crisis of this magnitude, but it isn't our first crisis, and unfortunately it won't be our last. Three Brothers Bakery has dealt with crisis in the past, as Janice mentioned before. When I first spoke to Janice, she shared with me the four parts of recovery, and I want to turn it over to Janice. Can you share what those four parts of recovery are in detail with us?
So we didn't understand, we were doing it, but we didn't understand what we were doing. And then after Hurricane Harvey, it all just kind of crystallized. And so when you have a disaster, and I think really it's the same for no matter what size business, the first thing that you focus on are your people. You know, what does your team need? Maybe their house could be flooded. Normally a disaster is a weather event for us, but their house could be flooded. The roof could have come off their house. They might have lost their car and not have any transportation. In this case, a family member could be sick. But also, it was really interesting when they did the stay-at-home order, I knew that we were going to stay open. And I didn't even think about that. Our team thought we were going to close. And what we pay them is their security. And so they need to have that security. So I needed to tell everyone we were going to stay open and we weren't going to lay off or furlough anyone. And so if you can, it is really imperative that you pay your people because you cannot reopen without them. And so a lot of my friends, they laid off and furloughed, and then the people are getting the unemployment, and the unemployment is very lucrative, and they don't want to come back. And so then they can't reopen. So we were lucky. We paid everyone. They did not make as much as they would have made on unemployment, but they were looking at the long haul, and they said it's better to be paid consistently and have my job and have the business thrive. So your people are number one. Number two is money. And I say there's kind of short-term cash money you need and long-term big money that you need. And so the main reason you need the short-term cash is because you got to pay your people. So if you can create a nest egg of any sort, you know, it's great if you can do 3 months. Most small businesses cannot. A month, anything you can do. So you can pay your people, because you can put everything else on a credit card pretty much, but you cannot put your payroll on a credit card. And then you're going to need big money. And I think everyone's seen that because this goes on and on and on. How are you going to sustain? So you need to figure out, how am I going to get that big money? In a normal disaster, you probably have insurance. In this case, we don't. We got the PPP money, a lot of us. And for some of us, there's probably going to be another round, and take advantage of that. The third thing is your assets. And that in a flood or hurricane or fire is going to be your equipment, your building, and your people again. But you have to figure out, how am I going to replace those things, or how am I going to fix those things? In the case of a flood, you can't get it in your community. You have to actually go outside your community, because everything in your community got flooded and is rusted. You don't want that. So my husband, I mean, he's going all over the country getting equipment. In this pandemic though, your assets are your people, and that's your team and your customer. And maybe that's also your banker. So those are all your assets. And so you need to put a focus on them. Like we talked about earlier, you're communicating with your customers, you're paying your people, you're keeping them abreast of what's going on. And then the last thing, and we've talked about this already, is clean up and return to operation. And so how do you reopen? How do you let people know? So it's the same formula. Every disaster, no matter which one it is, fire, hurricane, flood, or pandemic, it's the exact same formula. And just break it up into parts, and you'll be able to get through it easier.